Hello everyone. Thank you for clicking on my video based off the title. You are here to see how to draft a front bodice. So let's just go ahead and get started. I am building this bodice off of my dress form. I have a PGM size 12 dress form. It works for me. It's close to my body measurements and just the average kind of measurements when I'm draping, so I like using that. So I took all the points of measurements off of it for the top portion to use for draping a bodice. So the first thing you're going to do is draw your center front line. So we're just going to draw a long line. It's going to be a lot longer than your actual center front measurements, but then you'll have that line and then you can go back and you'll make a point from A to B that is going to be your full length measurement, and mine is 18 inches. I'm going to mark point A and point B. Then from point A, I'm going to square out and mark a point at my cross shoulder length. So I'm just going to square out to give me a baseline. And then I'm going to mark my cross shoulder length is 7 1/4. So I'm going to mark point C at 7 1/4. And then from that mark, C point, I'm going to then square down about 3-4 inches. Next, we're going to come down to point B, and we're going to just square this out. And from point B, we're going to mark our center front length, and that's going to run along the center front line. And the dress form center front length is 15 1/2, but we're going to drop that down 3/8 of an inch, so that I'm going to mark at 15 1/8. And that's just a slight, the 3/8 is just a slight adjustment for wearer's comfort. Then, and that's going to be point D. We're going to go back to point B, and on that line that we squared out, we're going to mark point E, which is our bust arc. And our bust arc is 9 7/8, and then we're going to add 1/4 to that, which is going to give us 10 1/8. And I'm going to mark point E along that line. And then from point E, I'm going to square up. And there's no exact amount, but you square up. You can always add to it, but that's going to be a reference point. A reference line for another point. So after squaring up from point E, we're going to come back to point B, and we're going to mark our dart placement. And our dart placement falls along the princess line, so that measurement is taken from the center front to the princess seam on your dress form, or if it's on a body, just where you would like that point to lay. And so my dart placement is at 3 1/4. I'm going to mark 3 1/4, and that's going to be F. And then I'm going to square down from point F just a tad, about 3/16. So that's slightly under 1/4 of an inch, and mark that. And then I'm just going to square out a little bit so that I know where it's level. Next, we're going to go from point B and create our point G, which is in reference to this squared out line that we did from point C. And that measurement is for our shoulder slope. And for me, it came to 17 7/8, and then we're going to add an eighth, so we're just going to make it an even 18 inches. And what you do is you find your measurement on your ruler. I place it on my point, which is B, and then you're going to connect it. You're just going to pivot it so that the tip of the ruler falls along your line. And then you're going to draw those in. And then this is going to be our point G. And then from point G, we're going to create point H, which is our bust depth. And all that is, you just come back along the line that we created and you mark down your bust depth. And mine is 9 inches. And you just mark it as a reference point. Because this point of measurement will be used for another marking later on. So we're going to come back to G, and then we're going to use our shoulder length. And our shoulder length, my shoulder length is 5 1/4 inches. And all we're going to do is just how we created this line on a pivot. We're going to do the same. Find 5 1/4. Pivot it along the AC line. And that's going to be point I, and this was point H. From point I, we're going to square out, and there's a point that I missed. From point D, we're going to square out as a reference point or a reference line. So you square out a little bit, and then from point I, we're going to square out until it meets with that reference line. Yeah. So this is a square corner, a right angle, and that's a square corner. Next, we're going to come from point I and create point J, and point J falls along the line that we squared out from E, and I to J is our strap length, and my strap length is 10 1/2. It's 10 1/2, and then we're going to add 3/8 3/8 to that. So that's going to be 10 and 7/8. And so you do the same thing, finding a point and swinging the ruler. So I have the tip of my ruler on point I, and I swung it out so my measurement of 10 and 7/8 falls along this line. And connect it. And you can always just mark it and then move your ruler over if that's more convenient to draw your line. But that's going to be point J. Then from J, we're going to go to K, which is our side length. And there's one little trick that you need to do with your ruler. You need to draw another reference line parallel to the E reference line that is 1.25 inches away. So I take my ruler, it's a 2-inch wide ruler, half of it's in centimeters, the other half is in inches, and so I'm able to use the line in inches, and I just mark and measure so I know that's 1 inch plus the 1/4 that I have on the gridded side, and I'll draw another reference line parallel. So from point J to point K, we're going to do our side length of 8.5. And connect it. Right there. And that's going to be your point K. From K, we're going to connect to point F. And point F is the small marking that we squared out from point E. It's 3/16 of an inch out. So we're just going to connect these 2 points from K to F. So that's F point. Next, we're going to draw L and M, which is our bust span measurement. And that's going back to that reference point that I said H. L and M is a line that's going to be perpendicular to that point, so it's going to cross through it. My bust span measurement is 3 3/4, and then we're adding 1/4 of an inch of a little wearer's ease to that. So it's going to be 4 inches. So you can do like the other lines of just making sure your ruler is square to the center front line. Draw a line through it and then go back and measure 4 inches to mark. And so that's going to be our point M and point L. After you get that, you're going to do your cross chest measurement, and your cross chest measurement is going to be kind of another floater line, but it's a reference point. It's going to be from N to O. That's going to run along here, but to find the N placement, you have to do a little bit of math. So N is 1/3 of the measurement from D to L. So you take that measurement, which is about 7 inches. It's 6 15/16 to be exact. So doing the math, that comes to about 2 1/3. So we're just going to mark I'll divide it. I'll mark it at 2 5/16. That's where I'm placing my end measurement. End point, not end measurement. And from that end point, then I'll draw out my measurement to my cross chest measurement, which is 6.5, and then we're going to add a 1/4 inch to that, so that's going to become 6 3/4. Oh. Now we're going to go back down to the bottom. The next step is to connect B to F, or create a B to F, and that's basically marking out or creating your waist point and dividing it amongst the dart and all that jazz. So we're going to go from B to F, and then we're going to create another line from K, and we're going to do a point P, and the total of those two sections should equal your waist arc. So let's walk this through. So from B to F, we're going to connect those points and measure it, and that comes to 3 1/4. And my total waist arc measurement is 7 1/8 on the form, and then we're adding a 1/4 inch of wear and ease to that, so 7 3/8. So the easiest thing to do is marking it. If we know from B to F is 3 1/4, then you take that point from 3 1/4, lay that on K, and then you can go in and mark at 7 3/8, just right here, which will be your point P. So next, we're going to create our dart. This block has a bust dart, and so we're going to connect point M to F, and take that measurement, measure out that distance, which is 8 1/2, and we're going to draw the same length line, and if it passes through P, that's fine, but we want it to cross through P. So drawing a line from M to F, and then the same length line from M to P. And like I did, I just drew a line and then I'll come back and measure it also at 8.5. And that becomes our dart. So once we have those, that's our base, and then we can connect some points. We'll be connecting G, O, and J to create the armhole, and then creating the armhole within this kind of ID square. So now that we're ready to draw out our armholes, we'll get our curved ruler and we'll place it down. Actually, I want to square out this O point a little bit more. Now we'll come in and use our curve and connect them. Also, I forgot one more point to square out. We also need to square out our J point. So we should have J is a squared out corner, D is a squared out corner, and I was a squared out corner. From point O, we just used it as a reference and kind of squared out just as a parameter or barrier line for when we are drawing our armhole in there. So now I can connect them. And you just lay your hip curve to connect within all of the points, or the reference kind of line. That's what that O squared out line is. You don't want it to go too far. You don't want it to go past that point. So I have my curve is on G. And don't worry about if it's exact, because there's still the process of truing your patterns with the front and the back and making sure that everything flows. So now we'll do the same with the front neck. And connect point I to your D point. And draw it in. Last, we want to make the slight adjustments to our dart. So we know that our point M is on our apex point, and you don't want any dart to sew all the way to that tip. So we're going to drop it down 1/2 inch and center it. So find the point that's 1/2 inch from the tip, and that is in the middle of both dart legs, and draw a point. and then reconnect that to your F line, F point, and also your Q point. Next, we want to curve out the waist seam line. And so just use your hip curve. There's a hip curve that you can use like this. I also have a softer hip curve that you can use. And you want to do a very slight curved line from F to B. And then you're going to do the same from K to Q. So we have, at this point, a completed front block. So the measurements that you'll need are listed, and they can be on a dress form. You can find them on a body. You just need those points of measurements for reference, and then you can draft a block for yourself, for a client, or for any design that you're interested in doing. After you draft your block, there is a step of chewing everything out, but we're going to go to drafting the back. So come back to see how to draft the back bodice.